Hi, welcome to my Red July monthly reading wrap-up. Before I get started, what books did you read that had red on the cover? I mostly did red books on the cover, but there's definitely books I did but there's definitely books I read that had no red on the cover. But that's part of the rules of doing this color of the month, is to just try to read at least one book that has the color or colors, and it's just kind of a fun way to clean off your TBR stack or your TBR shelf. The first book that I read was Lisa C's Lady Trans Circle of Women, and this one this one is a historical fiction that takes place in the 1400s, and it's about Lady Tan, who is a female doctor, which back then was very unusual for a woman to be a doctor. But if a woman was a doctor, she was only allowed to be a doctor for women with women's issues, basically like a gynecologist. It's so fascinating learning about life in the 1400s in China. They're doing foot binding still, well, obviously. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called a marital bed that girls whose family had money made, and they looked just so intricate and kind of gothic almost. She's living in a time where love is not really a thing. It's all about arranged marriages and growing to love someone. And she gets married off when I think she was 14. And just reading about what that would be like, leaving your family and becoming part of another family, never having anywhere near as much worth in the world because you're a woman. I know we have our moments now where we feel that way, but I mean, we get to pick who we marry. We get to pick who we're intimate with. We get to pick who our friends are. We get to pick whether or not we talk to our family. We get to decide whether or not we see our friends. She couldn't see her friend. We get to pick where we live, whether we vote. I mean, look at me. I am a self-employed woman who married who I wanted to marry. I vote in every election. I mean, things are so different now. I get that they're not perfect yet, but compared to 1400s China, yes, things are amazing. I immediately fell in love with this book. I love Amy Tan's writing, and I listened to this book. I didn't actually physically read it. It's about survival. It's about moving forward. It's about figuring out how to give your life purpose, even if it feels like your life sucks. It's about creating the life we want, growing old. That's kind of a fun thing, right? As you start aging and there's all these, I mean, in our world today, it's a little bit different, but there's always struggles, I think, for women as they begin to age. And it turns out Lady Tan is a real person in history. If you have a lot of money set aside, you can actually buy a copy of the book that she wrote about what she learned teaching medicine to women throughout her life. I think on eBay I found it for $80 something. But yeah, she is a real person that you can look up that was around historically and stuff. It's pretty cool. I gave this 5 stars. I also listened to Little Cruelties by Liz Nugent. That one is about 3 brothers. We find out in the beginning of the book that one of the brothers has been killed, but we don't know how, and we don't know who killed him. The book goes through the view of each of the 3 brothers, and it bounces around a lot to the point of being irritating. It would be like, okay, Luke, 2013, Luke, 2009, Luke, 2021, and then I'm trying to remember the other brothers' names. Brian, 1983, and then Brian, 2016, like just really jumping all over. And it would do 3 or 4 chapters per brother, but bouncing around in ways that didn't make sense with each of the brothers. Like, I guess I kind of want a book to be either now and then, or then and now, or something like that. But when there's so many timelines, it gets really, and so many protagonists, it just got very confusing and kind of washed itself out for me a little bit. And I felt like it was really more of a family drama than a psychological thriller. So I give it 3 stars. Well, I don't know where I put the next book, and I'm not going to go find it. But for the Killer Reads book club, I listened to The Night of the Hunter by Davis Grubb. It's definitely a thriller, but in a different kind of way. This is a noir thriller. It's about 2 siblings who have a dad who was arrested for stealing money from the bank. And no one knows where this money is. But the 2 kids know where it is. And the dad in prison won't tell anyone where it is. And the children have decided to keep where it is a secret. Now, I didn't think it was that hard to guess where it was, but it was very compelling. The mom wanted to know where it was. Everyone in town wanted to know where it was. His cellmate in prison wanted to know where it was, and he ended up being hung. I'm just revealing the first few chapters. I'm not telling you too much here. It turns into this terrible situation where after he's gone, someone starts doing everything they can to get that money and going after these kids. And it's scary for the kids, just worrying what's going to happen next to them and feeling like, I felt like I really wanted to protect them. And obviously as a reader, I can't do that, but it was really good. I was on the edge of my seat. I read it very quickly. There are a few things that were a little bit irritating about it. The writing is beautiful, but when the author is doing quotes, every single quote has no quotation marks around it. And the only way that you know that someone said something was it'll say, John said, Kathy said, which gets irritating too. I felt like I had to keep going back and rereading it as a quotation as opposed to a paragraph. I'm one of those people. I don't know. Let me know about you, but I picture everything in my mind when I'm reading. So I'm a slow reader because I am actually picturing what the characters look like. A lot of times I'll assign actors or actresses to the characters. I picture exactly what the dog looks like, what the house looks like, all of it. And so I stop and reread things a lot so I can really get a clear picture in my mind of what it is. I'm loving this color of the month situation because, yeah, I just am. No reason, just loving it. The Angelmaker by Alex North. This was a phenomenal book. I don't even want to get into what it's about. If you're interested in reading it, just get it. There's quite a few different points of view in this book. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of timelines. Not as confusing as that one I mentioned, but there are. If you're going to read this book, I recommend only reading this book because you really have to pay attention to it. And I think that's why there's a lot of people that don't like it. It's confusing. If you're not really paying attention, it's not going to make sense and you might hate it. There's a lot of stuff in here about theory of time and free will, and it's clever, and it's got this sarcastic humor that I love. I laughed out loud so many times, but I know my sense of humor is a little bit too sarcastic for a lot of people and maybe a little too dark for a lot of people. So there's probably a bunch of people that would not find this book funny at all, but I thought it was hilarious. It's a slow burn book, and what kind of balances it out is this author writes in a way where It's slow burn and you have to pay really close attention. But then at the end of every chapter, there's a cliffhanger. So I couldn't put it down. I read it very quickly. One other thing I just want to mention, with it being August, sorry about my notes here, but look at the red inlays. I love that because when I'm reading books like this, I read books naked. No, I mean, when I read hardback books, they are naked. They don't have the cover on them. I don't mean I'm naked, but I like it when it looks like this, having a color here, so that when I'm reading, I can just kind of feel that color the whole time. I don't like it when this is white. Do you care about that? It's probably just me, but I feel like most books have a white inlay here. And I love that little detail. So that was a 5-star book also. There's a little bit of red on this one. Container Gardening for Beginners. I read this in about half an hour. I mean, it's a very quick book to read, and you can scan it really easily, and it goes into different types of fruits, vegetables, and spices that you can grow, and how to grow them, what to grow them in, so on and so forth. I really would just love to be someone that decides that I want a tomato and onion salad with red vinegar, you know, those ones, and be able to just go out into my garden and get tomatoes and an onion. And that's the whole point in doing this. And I'm really excited. I have to wait until the fall to even get started. I didn't rate that one because I don't know how good it is yet. I haven't started growing anything in there. Megan Collins is one of my favorite authors. Her new book, Thicker Than Water, just came out. If you look at the cover, it's got wallpaper on it, right? And throughout the book, she's talking about this wallpaper that is red, this white with red roosters, and it looks like splotches of blood. And I want to know why. I mean, if I could ask her, why didn't we go with a wallpaper that was white with red roosters on it that was torn, and then the house in front of it, instead of this one? I mean, it's cool and all, but it just, right? Doesn't it seem like if that's part of the book, it should be on the cover? This one is about Julia, Sienna, and Jason. Sienna and Jason are siblings, and Julia is best friends with Sienna. So it's kind of like a triangle in that sense. And Julia and Sienna are very, very close. In this book, Julia's husband gets accused of murder. And Julia and Sienna do not agree about whether or not they think that he did it. And it tests their friendship. And it really does a nice deep dive of female friendships and what they're about and what the essence of them is. This author really excels at character development, and she's got so many little details that she tosses in that I really appreciate. There's a little extra that she throws into her writing that I really appreciate. This book also talks about the kinks that can happen in friendships. Betrayal, lies, how do we keep those friendships going? It's about loyalty, and one of the characters even has a blind loyalty towards one of the other characters. And one of the characters in this book really irritated me, and I thought, wow, I am really invested in this, because I usually don't get that irritated by characters or don't feel that emotional about the books that I'm reading, probably because I read so many of them. I found Jason, Julia's husband, to be very melodramatic and almost like a soap opera character, a man on a soap opera. And I just found it to be unrealistic at times and a bit much. But otherwise, I thought the book was amazing. So I gave it 4.5 stars. I'm rounding it up to 5 stars. I also listened to Ripe by Sara Rose Etter. Sorry, I keep looking at my notes. I have to. I listened to this book, and this one was about a woman who lives in San Francisco, and it's like a modern day dystopian novel where if you think about it, in a lot of ways, depending on how we look at our life, we might be in a dystopian situation right now. I mean, isn't that kind of the human condition, though? If you read classical literature, or you read, like when I've done, when I do my genealogy and I read journals from family members from hundreds of years ago, everybody thinks that things have never been as bad as they are right now. If it's hot out, never been this hot in this city in the history of the world. That kind of thing. That's how we are. So it's easy to see that one could extrapolate that there's a dystopian situation going on in San Francisco. Now, I don't know if I agree with that or not. I haven't been there in a long time. But in this book, she's got a boss who's a jerk, a boyfriend who's a jerk, a job that she hates. The job keeps taking over her life more and more, and she's forced with a lot of difficult decisions. And I found it very addictive. Now, the protagonist in this book, I'm so sorry, I don't remember her name. She is struggling with depression, and it was really interesting to understand a little bit more about depression and what people who have it are going through. I think this might be a good one if you're trying to understand people who are depressed. Or maybe if you are depressed, maybe it would help you not feel alone. But for me, it really helped me understand depression a little bit better. And I gave Ripe 4 stars. Another favorite author of mine is S.A. Cosby. I read All the Sinners Bleed. I love this cover. I did a decent amount of annotating on that one. I think if you're going to read this one, just go into it blind. Don't read this synopsis. I prefer to do that with just about any book anyway, to be honest. I tend to really, at this point, go off of word of mouth with whether or not I read a book or if I already love an author. And this one, if you liked Razorblade Tears, I think you'll like this one. It is that caliber. It's very, very good. The one thing that happened when I read Razorblade Tears that did not happen in this book was I cried. I didn't cry in this one. But this book did hit me. I've been thinking about it a lot since I read it. I think there's definitely some trigger warnings, and I tend to not really mention that a lot on this channel, but if they're harsh enough, I will, and they're pretty harsh on this one, so I felt like I needed to tell you. It's very, very gritty and very masculine. The protagonist in this book is struggling with something in their past, and they're trying to move on. They've moved back home, and they are now the sheriff of the town that they moved back home to. There's a lot of information in here about living in the South and the racism that exists there, and there's a really good amount of information about religion in the sense that why do people that don't believe in God not believe in God? Yeah, I think I worded that right. There's also a lot in here about human nature, and my favorite moments in this book were moments where Titus, the protagonist, was talking to his brother Marquis or talking to his dad Albert. I love those family moments and that closeness. The dedication of this book really stood out to me. It says, "To my brother Darrell Cosby, what we know, only we could ever know." Right? That is so true about siblings. So it is about the bonds between siblings and parents and children, and also about doing what's right, even if it's really hard to do what's right. I thought it was amazing. I really did. And I'm not sure. I've heard that there's mixed reviews on this book, and I'm not really sure why, but I personally loved it. It meant a lot to me. I did a lot of annotating, and I want to read it again. I thought it was great, and I give this book 5 stars. See what I mean? I had a really good reading month. I did have some DNFs, and they were all audiobooks. I'll just put them up here, and you can look at them. But those are the ones that I I don't even know that there was necessarily any shade I need to throw at them. It's just those books didn't do anything for me. I just couldn't get into them. So then I listened to Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King. And this is a book that I read when I was in my early 20s. And I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it'd be fun to read it again and see if I still feel that way. I do. I think it's amazing. I love it. It's really a study on the female friendship again. When two women are friends and what makes women friends, and just the dynamics of friendship and what it's really about. The voice actress on this audiobook is phenomenal. And they even had a little bit of sound effects in the audio version, which I really appreciated. And it's very different from the movie. If you're going to read it, don't expect it to be like the movie. It's basically Dolores is sitting in the interrogation room at the police station. She's answering their questions and talking very honestly, brutally honestly, about what has happened. Have you ever hit that point where you just don't care anymore? You just finally say what you've been thinking all this time? That's what she's doing in the book. And she is being accused of killing her employer, Vera. But it's so good. But that's the whole thing. It's just her sitting talking to the cops. There's not a bunch of different scenes or times, or it's just her talking about the past and leading up to where she's at now. And it was really hard to stop listening to. And I did, because I wanted to read it so bad, I did have times where I would physically read it as well and then go back to the audiobook. There are some serious triggers in here, though. I've got some real triggering kind of books this month, so I wanted to forewarn you. If you're going to read this, you might want to check out the trigger warnings. But boy, is this a good book. This is another 5-star read for me. And by far the most triggering book I've read in a really long time is The Shards by Bret, Easton, Ellis. And this is a big, big book. It is 588 pages. But be sure to look up the triggers on this if you're thinking about reading it, because there's a lot in here that is hard to read. It's very, 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 very dark. The dedication on this one I thought was hilarious. For no one. Right? It does feel a little lonely sometimes being in this world. In this book, we follow Bret. This Bret. As a teenager, he's a high school senior. It's 1981, and it's a nice little revisit to the past. Now, I was pretty young at that point, so I don't remember some of the things he's talking about. But it is nice to think about the music, the movies, how life was, because obviously it was a different world back then. It was just nice to take a step down memory lane. And it's amazing, though, how much some things have changed, how catty and petty we were, but maybe we're not now, and then in some ways we are and we weren't then. But the rest of the book, the characters and everything that happens are fictional, but he uses himself as the protagonist. But this is a murder mystery, and it's the murder scenes are very graphic and very violent and very disturbing. And Bret is he's a gay guy who is not able or ready to come out of the closet, because it was a lot harder to do back then. So he is trying to make the world think that he's attracted to girls. So he's got a girlfriend. She doesn't know what's going on. It was kind of funny, though, because the author writes in here about his love for Stephen King books. And I was listening to Dolores Claiborne at the same time I was reading this, and I thought that was kind of funny that those were the 2 books I was reading at that time. But if you're ready for... Oh, also, the sex in here is very, very graphic. But if you're looking for a book that has really strong queer representation, this is the book for you. I did really get into this book, and it gave me insomnia multiple nights where I just had to keep reading, couldn't go to sleep. I guess I should mention that since my channel is called Books Cause Insomnia. The other book that gave me insomnia was The Angelmaker. And then the last book that I read in July is The Diva Delivers on a Promise. This is the newest domestic diva mystery cozy book by Krista Davis. And I thought this one was very cozy and very wonderful. I enjoyed the mystery. I loved all the coziness and the food and the china patterns and the friends that she has. It was just absolutely wonderful. So this is another 5-star book for me. And I will be back soon. I'm going to be doing the full moon readathon with Jan Agaton, or not with her, but she's hosting it. And that's a 2-week readathon, and I'm going to be vlogging that. I know a lot of you guys really like the vlogs, so those will be back. And then in the second half of the month, I will be doing the yellow and white August books. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day or night. Happy reading. Bye.